Okay, so I'm an ENTP, which 16personalities.com classifies as the debater. I find this true in my personal life, as I like to argue politics, film, video games, anything else with friends. The website describes ENTP as the following. An odd juxtaposition arises with ENTPs, as they are uncompromisingly honest, but will argue tirelessly for something they don't actually believe in, stepping in another's shoes to argue a truth from another perspective. With this in mind, let me argue the case against Doug Ford and Ford Nation.
Olivia Gondak. It says that I wanted to eat her pussy. Olivia Gondak. I've never said that in my life to her. I would never do that. I'm happily married. I've got more than enough to eat at home.
Yellow 80! Yellow 80! Say that!
You asked me a couple of questions, and what were those questions?
Do you smoke crack cocaine?
Exactly.
Of water and the general manager of transportation. I'm crack for the mayor. I'm Somali. I'm like the guys who got caught on video with. I came through for the mayor. I was talking to where Mayor Ford is. I have crack.
Yes, I have smoked crack cocaine. But no, do I? Am I an addict? No.
When have you?
Have I tried it? Probably in one of my drunken stupors, probably approximately about a year.
I think everyone generally agrees that optics are important for political candidates. Rob Ford, former mayor of Toronto, was essentially fired from his position after a video surfaced of him smoking crack. Instead of living in infamy, he became a household name, selling t-shirts and bobbleheads, all before his cancer-related death in March 2016. His effectiveness as mayor is debated, but from what I understand, most working-class Torontonians were okay with him. And while this video isn't exactly about Rob Ford, we can't escape his shadow while discussing his brother Doug. You see, Torontonians were deeply concerned about their city's image following this ongoing gong show from 2014. And understandably, in America, people were getting the idea that Toronto was a crack haven. You know, it's so popular out there, even the mayor's in on the action. I could play Rob Ford clips for hours, but Rob shenanigans aside, he captured something in Torontonians. Well, some Torontonians. You see, Toronto is a tale of two cities. Your cosmopolitan lakeside elites, hipsters, and university students living in the downtown core of Toronto, and the more working class and struggling Torontonians living in what's known as the Greater Toronto Area. Rob Ford definitely appealed to the latter, while doing nothing but enraging the former. The downtown crowd goes in more for a cat lady sort of vibe. For someone like Kathleen Wynne, a divorcee, born-again lesbian, currently Premier of Ontario, which is the throne Ford is challenging. This is a woman who allows former convicted sexual predator write the sex ed curriculum for the province. Whereas the GTA crowd, at least among the conservatives, go in more for a traditional family values sort of vibe. Someone like Tanya Granick-Allen, who I'll talk more about later. But in the middle, we find Doug Ford. So what are his platforms? Well, he's pledged to scrap the Liberal Party's minimum wage hike from its current $14 to $15 next year. That was the plan. Instead, he's offering an income tax credit for minimum wage workers. Anyone making less than $28K a year would pay no income tax. Personally, I think this would lead to a massive deficit. Well, even larger. Ontario already has twice the debt of California. No, really. That's not per person, that's dollar per dollar. The Fraser Institute has a great write-up on the debt disparity, which I'll leave in the description, but here's the infographic. California is $144.8 billion in the hole, while Ontario sails past at $267.5 billion. That's $20K debt per capita. And now I know it's an issue of scale. You know, the person making $28,000 a year isn't going to be paying as much in income tax as somebody who's making $280,000. I get that, I understand. Still, where does this money come from? That's something you have to ask. After all, Ford said he would balance the books and keep them that way. That's one of his platforms. He's yet to provide a budget on how to do that. So usually when people hear tax cuts, and think about where the money's going to come from, they immediately look at the middle class. But Ford announced a 20% tax cut for those earning $42K to $86K, which is in essence the middle class. So you think, okay, these people are also going to be paying less into the system. So how do we collect this money? From the upper classes? Well, if you're cutting corporate tax from 11.5 to 10.5%, only to then tax high earners after the fact, that's not really a way to increase business, as Doug Ford proclaims. You know, he goes on and says that Ontario is open for business. Well, this doesn't really seem to be a good way to be open for business. So Ontarians find themselves in a position where minimum wage earners are not being taxed. The middle class is getting 20% off. So it's like a drop in the bucket for them, you know, for considering the debt, considering the billions of dollars of debt. And if you want Ontario to be open for business, you can't be charging them high rates personally or through their company, because they're not going to stay. They're not going to bring their business to Ontario. So Doug Ford's tax plan is like that kid who runs for class president. You know, he promises you a soda fountain in the halls, a pool in the gym, okay? You get Fridays off. It's just not realistic.
You know, trying to push, you know, radical sexual education on the young or gay marriage. You know, I almost vomit in disbelief. I'm like, are you kidding me? How can this be happening? Just 20 years ago, we were liberated from this communism, and now we're embracing these lack of values, lack of ideals that the communists would have you embrace.
So fanboying aside, where's the lie, right? I mean, we do have like a run amok sex ed curriculum, you know, as demonstrated here. Like, look here at this chart. This is what they want to teach. This is what they want to teach your kids. I think this is pretty sick. I think that goes without saying. Tanya gained notoriety being the only candidate to speak up against the sex ed curriculum. This video clip is taken from a 2014 talk she gave, I think in Croatia, but everything she said here fits her platform perfectly well. After all, why should a Christian woman desire gay marriage in her nation, let alone homosexual practices to be taught to her children in public schools? And the other thing about communism, well, just take a look at, you know, any institution, any college or university campus right now. I mean, I don't have to do the Jordan Peterson song and dance of Marxism in the institutions. You know, everybody knows that. We all know this. Everybody knows this, so I won't even bother with it. But everything she says here is correct. And look how much of a contrast this is compared to Doug's brother, Rob. In both cases, we have two individuals that are looking to lead in some way in their local district, their city, whatever. And both say things that could be considered telling it like it is, or talking straight. The difference is, while Rob was buffooning around talking about lady parts and smoking crack, Tanya was talking about her Catholic, Christian, traditional beliefs, which to me doesn't exactly seem incongruent with a conservative party. The difference is, once Tanya came under fire for this video being released from 2014, Doug was pressured into dropping her, and he did. However, he had no problem running cover for his brother during the whole crack thing, until it came out, bona fide video evidence that he was toking it up. So you see that there's a bit of a discrepancy here, I think. And this ties back into my initial point about optics. If I had to pick one of two people to represent me and my interests as a conservative, as a traditionalist, I would pick the conservative traditionalist over the guy who is kind of riding Trump mania a little bit. It's kind of riding that vague populism because he's a known name, right? Like, people know Ford from his brother, and that's about it. Well, like, what's Doug? You know, who's Doug? What's he done? Nobody knows. Nobody cares. His tax plan sucks, you know. But because he's a Ford, that means he's a guy that the working man can trust, that the average conservative will get behind. Well, I think when Tanya Allen points out that she doesn't blame Doug so much as his advisors, I'm inclined to agree with her, just based on who his advisors actually are, you know. So So even though I'm a traditionalist, why would I argue against Doug Ford? Because I think people in America got their hopes up with Trump. People kind of drank the Kool-Aid, thinking that he was going to be this god emperor, meme come to life, come to fruition. But he wasn't, of course. And I knew that at the time. I knew that he wasn't going to be the end-all be-all. He's a symbolic stepping stone. And I'm tired of people on our side, on our team. They get their hopes up for a candidate, and then they do something that is incongruent with what we would want them to do. And then we act flabbergasted and surprised, as if we should not have seen this coming, as if this was completely out of left field. So on June 7th, for those of you who live in Ontario, I would recommend still voting for Doug Ford, but keep in mind that any victory you get out of it is purely symbolic, just like the Trump victory was. Don't expect your country to start coming back. Don't expect nationalism. Keep your head out of the clouds. Because this is a slow drip process. This is something that isn't going to be achieved with one candidate whose brother was a bombastic news buffoon for a few months. This is going to be achieved by you. What you should be doing is canvassing for your local candidate, networking, and keeping things very crypto, keeping your views crypto. And from there, get involved in local politics, get involved in city council meetings, argue for what you think is right. If you're a parent, go to PTA meetings, right? So your kids don't have to learn about this, and so on. Because if we have more Tanya Granick Allens out there running for premier, then there are Doug Fords and there are Kevin O'Learys, and these plain opportunists that you can see from a mile away, then just by odds alone, we'll start winning elections, and we'll start getting MP seats, we'll start getting local city council seats, outnumbering candidates in the premiership, then we'll become premiers, and eventually prime ministers. But it's a slow process. It requires low time preference. We will need to accomplish this through a long march of the institutions, like what Jordan Peterson complains about, but never actually has a solution for. He always says, oh, they did this long march through the institutions. We have to march for ourselves.